Welcome back to the Inside Story with RLLC. Today we are talking to Gabriele Nicolet about the importance of turn taking. How are you today?
I'm so well, and I'm happy to be here with you, Tristan.
Oh, we are so happy that you are here. This is a big topic, and I'm excited that we're going to learn more about it.
Excellent. Yeah. Me too.
Amazing. So first thing I want to do is just have you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right. My name is Gabriele Nicolet. I live in Washington, D.C. I'm the proud owner of Speech Kids, which is a speech therapy practice devoted to serving young children and their families with speech and language disorders and delays. We see late talkers, we see kids with autism, we see kids who don't talk so good for one reason or another. And I'm also the co-owner of something called Raising Orchid Kids, which is a parent education and parent support group, parent support organization. We run classes for parents who are raising orchid kids, and we can get into what that is. But basically, orchid kids are those sensitive, needy, difficult, challenging, quirky, fill in the adjective of your choice. They need a little extra. And they're often hard to parent. And so because they're hard to parent, we created a class for parents of those kids. And we run that several times a year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But my real passion is to help families with young kids really get to know and figure out how to be with their young kids, whether or not they have speech and language needs.
Right.
Because it's such a fun age, 5 and under, and can be really challenging for people who don't know how to do things, how to interact, how to play, how to talk to, small people who are new here and who are sort of figuring out the rules still.
Right. Well, that is awesome. It sounds like very rewarding work as well.
Oh my God. You have no idea. I love what I do. Every day, I am thrilled to go to work.
Oh, I love to hear that. Wow. Well, if people were looking to find you, like in the world and also online, where would they go?
We see, so our support groups and our parent education classes are all virtual. You can find those at raisingorchidkids.com. raisingorchidkids.com. And my private speech therapy practice is at speechkids.com. That is DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and Florida, oddly.
Florida. Well, great.
We have somebody with a license in Florida. So as you know, speech therapy is a licensed profession. And so the kiddos have to be in one of the states where we have a license.
Right. All righty, perfect. And for anyone that's looking for those things, I'll put them in the show notes so that listeners can find that info very easily.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Of course. All righty. Well, if you're ready, we can just jump right into turn taking.
Let's do it.
All righty. So first base question is, what is turn taking and why is it so important?
Yeah, good one. Okay. Turn taking, as we are going to think about it here, is any act that involves me doing something and you doing something related. So we think of it in terms of conversation. I ask a question, or in this case, you ask a question, I answer the question. If we're in a conversation, really what that means is you ask a question, I answer it, and I sort of volley back to you, right, by asking you a question, and I invite you to come back. And so then we're having a conversation. Conversation is a really familiar turn-taking activity. But when we're talking about young kids, it might just be a smile. And so if we want to rewind way back from conversation to when babies are born, the first thing they're going to do at about 6-8 weeks, right about the time when we're ready to throw them out the window, because they're keeping us up all night. No, really, Tristan, this is true. Are you a parent?
I'm not a parent.
Okay. No. Anyone who's listening will know. after 6 to 8 weeks of being up in the night and you are, sort of nursing and you're awake and you're changing diapers and you're doing all these things and your child, your baby is just taking. Many parents reach this point where they're like, oh my God, something has to give. And right about that time, this is related to turn taking, by the way, right about that time is when they develop a social smile.
Wow.
Yes. And so what happens is on that magical day, and most parents will tell you they remember, if not the actual day and the time, the feeling of, and I actually have chills because I remember the first time my son smiled at me. He's now 18 years old, by the way. So you do something, you say something, you smile at them. Often it's over a diaper change or when they're in your arms and you're looking at them, right? We have that sort of close head-to-head, close eye contact situation. And the parent does something and the child smiles. Yeah. That's turn taking.
Yeah.
That's the first time it happens. And then, you're getting, so then you smile back and then they smile back and then you laugh and then they laugh and then you do something else and then they do something else. And so that's that whole thing. We started off this question, even just talking about conversation. We were assuming it's verbal conversation. There's a whole conversation going on between an infant and its caregiver.
Right. Wow. Oh, that made me just really happy.
I know.
You don't often think like, I'm going to take a turn smiling, but it really is something that you take turns at doing. You smile and someone has something to give back to you.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it's key. Again, it makes us not want to throw the baby out the window. It serves a very useful evolutionary purpose.
Right. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I've learned this now. Take it later into my life.
There you go.
So we kind of hit the next question, which is how early does turn taking begin? It sounds like it starts around that 6 to 8 weeks, you said, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And my next question would be, how do babies initiate turn taking? But you said with a smile. Are there other ways?
Yeah. So if we go sort of flash forward a little bit, so 3 to 6 months, we're expecting babies to, there's so much going on in development, right? And it's all very closely linked. But from a speech and language point of view, we're looking for cooing noises. We're looking for raspberries, that squealing, all of those noises as kids are exploring their vocal tract. Well, what we want, and as it relates to turn taking, is we want them to be doing that on their own, but also to get a reaction from people and to engage in, another word we use a lot is reciprocal, meaning back and forth, right? Interaction over multiple turns. And so that's one way. Another way is just by grabbing, right? So it's the beginning of like cause and effect, of agency, of like, I can make things happen and I can participate. And that starts really early, like much earlier than we think, than we might imagine.
Yeah. You said, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. 4 to 6 months, say, is when we're hearing those squeals and the babbles and then it just gets more and more complex, right? Where now kids are babbling when they get to about 9 months.
Right.
Ba, ma, ma, ba, 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 da, da, da. Oh, I do, it was da. And you can have a whole conversation, guess what? With somebody who cannot pronounce a single word. Correct.
Right? Yeah. This is such a side note, but there's a video that I keep seeing just like on the internet of a dad and a baby that are sitting next to each other on the couch. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I love that video.
Yes, it is everything.
It is everything. It is everything we teach. So what I wish I could do is just show that video, like walk around with a big billboard and just be like, see, this is what you should be doing.
Right.
But I want to say, this is interesting too, from a developmental standpoint. Often what's happening with the families that I work with is their kids are not giving that back.
Right.
Okay, so we started off sort of happy, happy, joy, joy, right? Kid is smiling, we're reciprocating, we're going back and forth. But a lot of times what's happening with kids with developmental issues is they're not giving back that turn, or they are engaging in one exchange,
right,
and not multiple exchanges, right? And so something like what that dad is doing, where he's, and if you haven't seen this clip, Google like what dad and toddler on couch or something.
Right.
It's gorgeous.
It is.
Because he's just like, he's talking to the 1-year-old as if the 1-year-old can converse back. And
right.
Yeah. And it's this beautiful organic, oh God, no, I love that dad. I love that dad.
It's so good. Mm-hmm. And he just babbles right back. He says no real words, but they're having a meaningful conversation with each other.
Exceptionally meaningful. And that's really, when we talk about like why we're doing the things that we're doing, it's not so our kids will talk later. Like we could teach robots to talk. That's all fine and good,
Right.
It's so that they will be in relationship. And so, you said, why is turn taking? Have you asked me yet? Why is turn taking important?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's because it helps us be in relationship.
Right.
And be connected to each other.
Yeah.
In whatever format that takes, which is why, again, a social smile is turn taking, is connection.
Right.
It's why babbling is connection, is turn taking. So yeah, it's all in there. And I'm doing my hands. You can't see that.
But yes, it's all mixed. We gotcha. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that the kids that you work with, often they may initiate something, but then they don't reciprocate, right? Mm-hmm. Once you give them something, they don't give anything back. Mm-hmm. So what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, so we have to sort of tease out. I'll outline a situation, and then I'll sort of walk us through it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Many times what's happening in kids with speech and language needs is they are they're kind of barely hanging on. They're sort of overwhelmed, right. by the amount of sort of stimulus in the environment, people talking to them, their own inability to sort of formulate words if they're trying to do that, or possibly they've just kind of shut out because the world is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And these are the Orchid Kids, right? The world is a very stressful place for them. Right. And so their brains are protecting them, and just kind of having them be on, it's like when you have the frosted glass, right. Some of the light gets in, but you don't have a clear picture of what's happening. And so if kids are in survival mode, which is often what's happening sort of neurologically, then number one, they don't have access to a lot of language. Number two, they may still be learning language. Right. And so they're not in a neurobiological place of being able to connect with other people, which means they're not in a neurobiological place to take turns. Right. Right. And so they may respond to a question. And this is what many parents understandably and reasonably do, which is ask their kids with speech and language issues a lot of questions. Right. Right. And actually we do this of our partners as well when they are non-communicative. Right. Yes. So when somebody isn't giving us what we want, we try to get it. And the easiest way, the first way we try often is a lot of questions. When we ask kids a lot of questions, they will answer us. But then they'll go back to masking and sort of being shut off. Right. They want to get us off their back. So they'll give us a one word, and then they'll go back to hiding kind of in plain sight. Mm-hmm. And so you don't get that richness. It's problematic on a couple of different levels. One, because parents are sort of inadvertently disconnecting from their kids because they're pushing, right? Mm-hmm. Two, the child isn't getting any practice with what this feels like. And so it doesn't feel good. And so they think conversation is bad. Turn taking is bad. And then everybody's feeling kind of yucky. Right. And so a lot of what we do in intervention is, number one, just try to kind of regulate and get kids more comfortable in their own skins.
Okay.
So we reduce demand. We weed out the schedule. Like something as simple as a schedule has too many different activities in it can be really alarming for some kids. So we weed that out.
Yeah.
We maybe get some occupational therapy in there to deal with some sensory issues, right? So we sort of tease out why is child feeling dysregulated, and we do that environmentally, and maybe we get some other interventions in place, and then we start to build up the relationship piece of things. I don't even care. I laugh because I'm the speech therapist who doesn't care if anybody ever talks. I'm like, I don't care about all that stuff. I'm gonna leave that to the other folks. But the thing I care about is, does your child feel comfortable and safe enough to want to engage in a reciprocal turn-taking kind of interaction?
Yeah.
And if we bring it back to like turn-taking as maybe not even an interactive, like a conversational kind of thing, but as sharing a toy, for example, like taking a turn with a toy. Yeah. Does your child feel safe enough? And do they know what's going to happen if they give a toy and take a turn, allow someone else to take a turn with that toy? Do they have the understanding and the security that they're going to get that back? Right. So that's like a whole other unit that I teach in them. I have a video course on my website called Toddler Talk, and there's a significant amount of time devoted to teaching parents how to get their toddlers to take turns with other kids in terms of like sharing toys, right? Because sharing is a big deal. Anyway.
No, that's helpful. I'll definitely put that in the show notes as well, so fantastic. People can find that. Is it like
It's a virtual course that's available on the Speech Kids website.
Cool. So people, it's kind of like on demand, right?
It is.
Okay, great. I'll definitely put that.
And there's also a free course there that you can opt into if you want to check it out first.
Okay, perfect. I'll put that down there so people can find it, because it sounds very fruitful if parents are having a hard time with the turn taking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah. Let me see. What is the next thing I'd like to ask you? So one of the questions on here is, what is joint attention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about joint attention.
Let's do it.
It's huge. Joint attention is, if you want to think about a triangle, where there is an object of attention. Could be a person, could be a building, could be a tree, could be an airplane, doesn't matter what it is, could be a book. And that's on the tip of the triangle. And the two people involved, or multiple people, are on the bottom of the triangle looking at the thing. When I know that you're looking at the thing, and you know that I'm looking at the thing, and we're enjoying looking at the thing together, then that's called joint attention. Okay. So it means, for example, if we're taking a walk with our toddler points to a dog walking down the street, looks at mom, looks back at the dog. That's joint attention. Okay. Where we're both paying attention to the same thing. Okay. So how does that fit into turn taking, and what is that, how are they related? Yeah, good. So we have to have joint attention in order to engage in turn taking. Right. Because if I'm hauling off over here, just sort of by myself, and I'm, it's funny because this, as I'm doing it, and I'm such a visual person that the audio format is a problem.
We'll work through it.
Right? If I turn my head away from you, I can have a conversation, but it's not going to be a true shared experience, right? Because my body language is kind of all wrong. My body language is not showing that we're having a joint experience. Right. And so that's one way that joint attention is important for turn taking. The other is, if you think about like a board game, for example, this is a classic example, right? If you have you ever played a board game with somebody who's on their phone?
It's very difficult.
It's very difficult and it's kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Right? Because the whole point of the game is that we're doing it together.
Right.
And then sharing our time. We each get a turn.
Yeah.
Right? Sharing our part of the together activity.
Yeah. When I was on your website a little earlier, I looked at it before we met. I also saw another word on there that I think would be of help if we defined it. Mm-hmm. What is central coherence?
Oh, so good. Oh my gosh. Okay, you're just like just a little thing.
I know, I'm just asking you all the big questions.
Okay. So central coherence means, it's so good the way you're structuring this. I love it. Because you're sort of going back up the pyramid.
Yeah.
Which is, what's the big idea?
Yeah.
Right? What is important? What is meaningful? What is the gist of this experience that we should be paying attention to? Okay, right. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to take a really silly example, which is
please
a car.
Okay.
So central coherence as it relates to a car is that it is a large machine that we use to get places. Right? It's transportation.
Right.
So that's like, right, the big gestalt of carness, right? Okay. Central coherence is not, as regards the car, a wheel spinning.
Okay.
Right. And the reason I use the car is because, and I was talking about an actual car, but in many of the kids I work with are very, and many kids with autism in particular, are very engaged with parts of a thing.
Right.
But not the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Right. And so, as it relates to sort of human interaction, central coherence would be something like, we're here, you and I are here to spend some time together, to be in connection and in relationship to one another so that we can help some people in the process.
Right.
We're not here so that you can answer a question and I can answer it. You can ask a question and I can answer it.
Right.
Right. This is not a rote exercise.
Right.
And so that's kind of how it might relate to something bigger.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I know I asked you a bunch of big questions about definitions of terms.
Yeah. It's good. It's such a good exercise to have to do because, we throw these terms around like everybody's supposed to understand them and they appear in the research and the literature and all this stuff. And, we, number one, we forget that not everybody has studied the same things that we have. And we shouldn't do that.
Right. But those were super helpful. So thank you for answering those little, little big questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So going back to the child, now we were talking about bigger questions, but now let's go back to the child.
Yeah.
How does turn taking expand during preschool years and then, the years following, but mainly preschool years?
Yeah. So first thing I want to say about this before people sort of stop listening if I'm droning on is 2-year-olds can't share. There, I said it.
2-year-olds can't share.
2-year-olds cannot share. So there's a thing that happens, which is super interesting, just kind of developmentally. And again, early childhood is like this fascinating period, I think, where there's so much going on and you never really stop to think about it until something goes wrong.
Right.
Right. It's like you just think that stuff is happening automatically, but there's so many moving pieces and it's incredible. Yeah. Okay. But how does turn taking evolve? Basically it is a process by which, sort of the big picture is brains come online. They realize that stuff isn't going to disappear. when they no longer have possession of it,
Right.
and that they will get stuff back. I mean, that's
You said brains come online. Amazing.
I mean, really, like, it's so, it, I deal with a lot of, being in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of parents who are highly educated.
Yeah.
And many of them come to me and say, my 2-year-old, my 1-year-old doesn't listen to me when I tell them what to do. And I'm like, and it's like, they're used to being at work where people listen because why? Because those brains are fully formed.
Right.
Like it really would do us a world of good to remember that, number one, your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old even, and threes are great, but they've only been here for 3 years.
Right.
Like, that is not enough time to learn all the rules.
Right. Exactly.
But between 2 and 3 is really when sort of individuality is being established, right? Mm-hmm. So 24 months, 18 to 24 months, kids are like separating from mom as just like recognizing that they're a separate person,
right?
Which I think is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
3-year-olds can many of them have a lot of language skills, mm-hmm. right? And so you can sort of carry on a conversation. You can do a little bit of reasoning with them when they're calm. And so they're starting to have had more experiences and understand more about how the world works.
Right.
And so if they've been in a situation where the rules have been consistent, where adults have been behaving consistently, this is a big deal, actually. Consistency is huge for safety, right? Safety first, turns out. Hugely important. Yeah. Then they can start to sort of apply and then do this turn taking. But honestly, the underlying mechanisms of turn taking, in other words, what we were talking about before, which is like that relational piece, that's all there. It's all humming in the background, right? The rest is just kind of the mechanics that we put on top of it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens if there's a breakdown in these mechanics that we've got of turn taking?
Yeah. So what can happen is, number one, I want to talk about failure a little bit. So kids learn that they're supposed to be doing something that they can't do or that they don't know how to do.
Okay.
And so then they turn away from it.
Right.
So what do I mean by that? So if I'm engaging in, let's go back to the board game. If I'm playing a board game and my brain doesn't allow me to sustain attention while somebody else is doing their thing, then I don't have the ability to sustain joint attention, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't have the ability to play that game. Now the other person's going to get mad at me, either kid or adult. And now I'm going to feel like, oh, well, I don't want to do that because that's not fun.
Right.
It's too hard.
Right. And
so when a task is too difficult, kids don't want to do it. They're not stupid. I always say this. Kids are not dumb.
Right.
Right? Like, they're not going to keep doing things
that they don't like.
Not only that they don't like, but that feel bad.
Right.
Right. The reason they don't like them is because they can't do them. They don't not do them because they don't like them. They don't do them because they're not good at them.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore they don't like them, right? It's the same kids who, I'm sure you get this, reading is boring. Anytime I hear boring, red flag, immediately, right? Same thing. I don't like games. Really? Because developmentally, we kind of expect you to at this point, and if you don't, again, it's not that I'm blaming anybody for this, but they're going to engage. Children who are having difficulty in that situation are going to engage in some self-preservation.
Yeah.
And thank God.
Exactly. Wow. So this kind of feeds into social communication, right? Mm-hmm. What makes that so challenging? You might have kind of answered that in the last
Well,
discussion.
but I think it's definitely worth exploring some more, because I think what we assume is that, and let's be clear, the social communication, this turn-taking behavior is a big challenge for kids on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. But not only for kids on the autism spectrum. This is a problem for example, somebody with a hearing loss.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can't hear what's being said, you're not going to be able to engage in the turn-taking process.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I think by and large, maybe 80% of the time, 70% of the time, we're talking about kids with autism who are not picking up on social cues, and for whom it's really difficult to pick up on social cues.
Yeah.
And so they don't feel good at staying engaged in complex social interactions. And so they're just not going to do them. When they don't do them, though, they lose out on practice opportunities. They further isolate themselves, which is not what they want.
Right.
Right. And so it does get very complicated. Particularly then if adults are using the same strategies and those aren't working, and then we're pushing further away from what we want.
Right.
Which is to allow kids to be in connection with us. And I think this is actually a big issue for some of the older kids, which is they've failed so many times in the past. And I think, we speech therapists sometimes do this too, where we're so focused on, we just want the kid to talk. We just want the kid to talk. We just want the kid to talk. And again, I want us to spend way more time on the connection piece than on the talking piece. There's a beautiful pyramid online. I wish I could remember what it is, but basically I'm sure you've seen a version of it where it's sort of all the sort of neurological functions that have to be intact. So sensory processing, interoception, all of the senses, all the interpretation of those senses. Mm-hmm. And then we start to layer on joint attention, play, all of that. The words don't even come, and it's a tiny little triangle on the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. So we talked about parents having problems kind of with using the same strategies and not seeing improvement in that. Mm-hmm. So what can they do at home that will help their child with turn taking, especially in social communication and in other things, maybe at school and stuff like that?
Yeah. I'm going to laugh as I say it. Talk less. Smile more. No. But actually, to quote Lin-Manuel Miranda, talk less, smile more. Engage in those very simple social routines. And so if we go back to the dad with the kid on the couch, right, we could actually get something like that going, where because the dad in that scenario isn't asking a lot of questions. He's he's asking rhetorical questions, you know what I'm saying, right, that don't require much of a response, right? So we can come in with less language, more physical play, that we can do turn taking with. So one of the things I love to have families do is if their kid likes to be tickled, right? We play the tickle game.
Yeah.
And we wait for that initiation of child locks eyes with you for half a second. Guess what? They get a bunch of tickles.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And then child locks eyes with you for another second. Okay. And we might think that that's about eye contact, and a lot is made of eye contact, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It's not about the eye contact. It's about the connection.
Yeah.
It's about whether that eye contact is pleasurable, and whether it's then releasing the oxytocin, which is right bonding hormone, rather than cortisol, which is stress hormone, which we don't want, right?
Right.
But it can be kind of there's a learning curve there.
Yeah.
Because we have to be really in tune with what, if our children are not talking to us about how they're feeling, we have to be really observational and in tune with what their bodies are showing us.
Right.
So you asked specifically, what are some strategies that parents can use? One is to play non-verbally with your child.
Right.
So that might be physical play. It might be just sitting down and making your own Lego structure because they want to do their own Lego structure.
Yeah.
And I often have kids, particularly on the autism spectrum, but not all, they don't want anybody else touching their structure.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody else can touch it. And parents always want to know, well, how can I get him to take turns with me? Okay, well, first we got to like get him used to you even sitting next to him, doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And we go baby steps. We go baby steps. And once we see that the comfort is there and the rapport is there and the connection is there, then maybe you're going to reach across and, oh, I put a blue one on top of your tower and sneak a turn.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, what's going to happen? Kiddo is going to take that blue thing off and throw it in your face. And you're going to say, oh, you didn't like that. That's okay.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go back to 10 more minutes of just building your own structure. So we take like minuscule steps.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. So continuing on with parents, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but when should they reach out to a specialist, and who in particular in the field do they reach out to get support if they're noticing a turn-taking issue?
A speech language pathologist is one of the people you might reach out to. Speech therapists, speech language pathologist, same thing as speech therapist.
Thank you.
Are often the first line call. Many preschool teachers like to refer for speech and language because it's a nice soft place to land.
Yeah.
There's some really great functional, useful things that, you know, we speech therapists can work on that are going to really make a difference for quality of life of parents and kids. And we can work on those fairly quickly. And so a speech therapist is a great place to start. Another one is an occupational therapist. I feel like in my experience, SLPs, speech therapists, and OTs, occupational therapists, are sort of the most play-based, I want to say global sort of thinkers about young children.
Right.
I will say there are many social workers who are also phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it really kind of just depends on, sometimes it just depends on who's doing the referring.
Right.
But I know if, you know, a few social workers who really work on play, for example.
Right.
And so all of us are sort of coming at this question of social and play development from slightly different but similar angles, which is, we know play is important. We know turn taking is important because of what happens later on. And we want to establish really good roots for that as early as we can. And so when we see kids who, I mean, you know, people ask me sometimes, is 15 months too young to start therapy? It's not.
Wow.
If I see kids who are not allowing anybody into their world, into their play, if I see kids who are not exhibiting joint attention, meaning when they see the dog on the street, they're not looking at mom to make sure she sees the dog too.
Right.
That is a kid I want to see.
Yeah.
And I want to help mom and dad figure out how to, I think of it as getting in under the blanket with them.
Yeah.
You know, and we want to sort of pry the door open a little bit. So anyway, I'm mixing metaphors, but that's a kid I want to, because here's what can happen. If we get them early, we avoid all the behavior that goes on top
right.
of kids who are failing. Again, right? They're not dumb. They're going to protect themselves. And
Yeah.
how are they going to protect themselves? With behaviors that help them avoid what they can't do.
Right.
But if they are never given an opportunity to fail repeatedly,
right,
then that's a beautiful thing. We just hit the ground running and we just keep running.
Yeah. Wow. I think those are all of my big questions. I think that's going to be super helpful to parents, because often there are other areas. And if you've listened to our episode with Vivian Siskin on stuttering, we talked about how parents think that things can kind of just like peter out, especially with stuttering. But it's good to hear it's never too early. It
is almost never too early. I mean, I always say to parents, worst case scenario, the therapist tells you,
right,
there's nothing going on here, right?
Yeah.
And if we're being totally honest and we're not lying to ourselves as parents, and as a parent, I can attest to this. If we're asking the question, we think there's something going on.
Yeah.
Right? If it hasn't even dawned on us, then chances are things are going well. And if things are going well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But if there are things that parents are asking themselves, they've noticed at the park, oh, my kid doesn't really look like other kids his age or her age. My kid doesn't really talk like other kids her age. My child doesn't really do the things that the other children are doing.
Right.
It's not that we want to be in this compare and despair mode, but it is something we want to take note of and ask somebody, and there's a great book that the child development consultants wrote called "Is It a Big Problem or a Little Problem?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we want to know.
Yeah.
Is it even a problem? Maybe
Right.
it's not a problem. And so, but if you're asking yourself, if you have that nagging gut feeling,
right,
go get help from somebody. Go ask the question.
So who would you ask that question to? Like, if let's say your preschool teacher hasn't seen anything, would you ask them for a referral, or would you do your own research to find a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist? Who do you ask the question to?
If I were a parent, and actually I was a parent who was asking these questions.
Yeah.
And so when I was a parent asking these questions, I first asked my pediatrician, and they gave me what is the word I'm using? A bad answer. They gave me the wrong answer and said, don't worry about it. And I was already worried. And because of my line of work, I was like, not listening to you.
Right.
The next person I called was, who did I call? Called my friend and got a referral. I think if I were going to do it now, I would probably take to Facebook and say, I need somebody who, can help me figure out if this is a big problem or a little problem.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the other thing that people can do is call the county.
Okay.
In which they live. So one of the things that's available to everybody, birth to 3, is early intervention services.
Okay.
And you can call the county in which you live, and they are required in a certain amount of time to provide an evaluation for free.
Wow.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's called infants and toddlers. Sometimes it's called early intervention or EI. And this is a great way for people to sort of talk to somebody who knows. Now, truth be, full disclosure, it's a government system. So it's a little bit bureaucratic. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a practitioner who's not awesome. But there are many amazing people who work for infants and toddlers or early intervention. And it's a fantastic place to start.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I think that I told you I was almost done, and then I wasn't, and now I think I've asked all my questions.
I would talk to you all day,
and it would be so wonderful. Do you have any other things you want to share with us that I maybe didn't ask you?
Nothing is coming to mind. This was so much fun. No, really, this was a delight.
I enjoyed it too. So I'm so glad, because it's just so much fun to learn about all of this stuff. I agree with you that the littlest ones are so exciting to work with.
I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. All the novelty and all of the things that are happening all the time.
All the time.
Amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. This was so fruitful and I think very helpful to parents and SLPs.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tristan.
Of course. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and make sure to subscribe so you know when we put out another new episode, and leave us a little rate and a review so we can hear from you. Awesome. Have a great rest of your day.